all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Double Feature Podcast, where every week me and my boy David go back and forth, bringing two movies together, trying to find a way to kill a weekend, a good marathon, or just the best double feature. David, how are you?
Well, we really did kill another weekend. We're really running on a theme that war movies love to be long. You're never going to really find that tight 90 war movie, are you?
I don't think so. I don't think a single movie we watched all month comes in under 2 hours.
No, well, Dunkirk does. I've said this last week, hour 45, so I should... Really, that's on me, because I just said no tight 90, and then it's closer to a tight 90, but...
Yeah, but I don't think Dunkirk's a tight anything. All right.
Okay. Well, we're not going to get back into that. We have two new movies for this week, Dane.
Two new movies going on with our theme of war films. We're on to the next and final war we will talk about this month, and that is the Vietnam War, with the two films Apocalypse Now and The Deer Hunter, which are two of the most, I guess, analyzed and talked about Vietnam films you can find. I think the only other one I can think of is like Full Metal Jacket, Platoon.
Right, and
that's like it.
I feel like we obviously did Full Metal Jacket, and that was kind of an interesting appetizer to this double feature. We did that in our Kubrick double feature back in January, and what was interesting to me most of all is that you have some completely different styles of movie going on here, despite the fact that they were made at similar times. I'm really interested to even add Full Metal Jacket to the equation at some point and kind of really start to break down Vietnam films, not just these two. But I think we picked a couple really interesting ones for this week.
Yeah, and not short ones either.
No.
I think both of these films clock in pretty close to 3 hours. I know Deer Hunter's actually just 3 hours clean.
Yeah, about 3 hours, 3 minutes, and then if I can finish typing by the end of this phrase, I can tell you that Apocalypse Now is 2 hours and 33 minutes.
Yeah, so for this double feature, we'll actually kill a weekend, because you're looking at like close to 6 hours of movie.
Oh yeah, and it's hard to believe too. At one point, the thing, because this is Apocalypse Now, obviously is one of the most prolific films to ever be made. It won the Palme d'Or without even being finished. I mean, that's high praise in itself, but it's hard for me to believe that there is a shorter version of this film.
Yeah, the thing about Apocalypse Now is I think since they released the Redux version, which is I think adds a half hour to the movie.
Oh really?
Yeah, that's the re-release they made. And like Apocalypse Now is at one point was ridiculously bloated. Like I think this is one of the first films to ever break 1 million feet of film. It was ridiculously long, and it took them forever to finish it. But Coppola is here. I think this is the one people say is the Coppola film where he basically put his stamp. This is the end of New Hollywood.
Yeah, I think so. You could really label that even in that Coppola having almost stumbled into an accidental blockbuster hit, that being Godfather, and then Part 2, which really only came on the success of the first one. Which, if I did a lot of research on it, I watched the Cinema Tyler 7-part series that is apparently unfinished, so I hope there's more episodes coming eventually.
Oh, for his Apocalypse Now?
Yeah, well, apparently there was going to be another episode.
Oh, yeah.
The last one I finished up before we started shooting. It's fascinating because he gets to make this, on every sense of the term, what would probably, in my mind, set the tone for huge productions that we make nowadays. Because this thing was a massive production.
Oh, yeah. Like, I think he put up... How much money did he have to put up for this movie? I know the budget for Apocalypse Now was ridiculous at the time.
Yeah, at the time, but it's weird because today, by today's standards, the budget really doesn't seem that bad, or in some
Yeah.
cases might even be some independent budgets. But I think here the term listed here is $31 million. Throughout the video, I was seeing figures for like 14 to 15 was the original quote when they
Yeah.
wanted to start production. Um, I mean, this movie feels like it was made for $160 million when you look at it on screen.
Oh yeah. Like there's the money that what they do with what they have is astounding.
Yeah.
And this is also a point I wanted to bring up. So, Coppola makes this in 79.
Mm.
He makes The Outsiders in 83, and then there's Stone like nothing after that in terms of like good movies.
Let me look back here because I do have The Outsiders on DVD, so you can't disparage that one. Although
I won't disparage The Outsiders.
You aren't disparaging it, that's sure. I'm not going to attack you for that.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Last thing was 2013 as a producer. No, we want director credits, of which he has 36. Right. So Distant Vision was the last thing in 2016, which is fascinating. We can't say nothing after The Outsiders because he did do Captain EO.
Okay, Captain EO. Captain EO is a whole other can of worms. That is perfection. Besides the point, I'm just saying that Apocalypse Now was kind of the swan song of big budget art films for Coppola, right? Because that was kind of his shtick. He made these movies that were art films, but actually had like a studio budget, studio feel to them. That was The Godfather. That was The Conversation. That was Apocalypse Now. And then he kind of, granted, he's the guy who changed Hollywood to do that, and he kind of stopped. So I think this is just an interesting analysis of also just Coppola's kind of career up to that point.
I think so, yeah. Because the other thing to think about too is like all the stuff that he turns out afterward. The guy cut his teeth on not even B movie, probably what you would be labeled as, if there was such a thing, C movie trash. So
yeah,
he
was working on the stuff Roger Corman was like, look, this is like filler for the B movie shit I make.
I mean, you could even go as far as to say that some of that stock was probably just stuff Corman wanted to wipe his ass with. But, I mean, you get interesting tidbits out of Coppola's career that you never thought you would. I mean, in that one of those was one of Jack Nicholson's earliest acting credits in The Raven, I believe it was. Or whatever that weird movie with Boris Karloff is. And this is an interesting one that for anybody who wants to go find out before we get kind of on the theme of this episode, over with this long intro and into the log lines. Apparently, during the shooting of that movie, they had like leftover stock that Coppola was like, well, let's make a movie out of this. And there was there's a YouTube channel, Austin McConnell. Dean knows of this, but anybody go check this channel to find this video, because he had recently bought the rights to this movie that Coppola had apparently made with the extra stock that was only dubbed in Spanish for some reason. So now a YouTuber apparently owns the viewing and streaming rights to this Coppola movie that nobody even wanted and was pretty much only being aired on Spanish television in the middle of the night. But it has Jack Nicholson in one of his first starring roles, because The Raven was a supporting thing. I don't even know.
That's fascinating. The 60s was a weird time. The 70s, they get weirder.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then on the opposite side of that, we have The Deer Hunter. Director is Michael Cimino, Cimino. I'm really bad at pronouncing his last name. But he makes The Deer Hunter, huge critical success. Everybody's like, bro, you're onto something. You get nominated for 5. You won 5 Oscars. You're in on this. And then he makes Heaven's Gate, which is the largest flop in film history. So the hits that high point and then hits that low point back to back. But yeah,
I mean,
Yeah, and also The Deer Hunter is just a weird movie.
totally weird. I mean, I'd like to say more about it now, but I'm going to have too much to say about it to when we eventually get to it. Probably not going to be able to
Yeah.
stop because there's so many things about that movie that you could talk about that it really leaves you flip flopping. Is I guess how I would put
Yeah,
it.
it bounces between absolute genius and absolute incompetence, sometimes in the same scene.
Yeah.
But yeah, but I guess that's the good introduction to these two movies. Let's get into the log lines so we can jump into talking about them proper.
Right, so the log lines for this week, our final week of War Movie Month, for Apocalypse Now, a traumatized army captain receives orders to go up the river and locate an AWOL colonel who has taken the war into his own world, one which the captain sinks further into. The Deer Hunter, a band of steel mill workers are drafted for the Vietnam War and watch their lives get ripped apart by the brutal reality of the jungle.
Now, which one of these do we want to watch first here? So I went Apocalypse Now into Deer Hunter.
Exactly.
That was my go. Honestly, I think that might have been the wrong way to watch them. Now that I think about it.
Yeah, that's the way I did them too, and I think we've said before that we should always end these double features in a spectacle, which is not the way that we did that.
Yeah.
If you were to end them on a
To
spectacle, you should go Apocalypse Now second, and possibly even watch a different movie other than Deer Hunter, because Deer Hunter
the
ends.
Deer Hunter is a whole can of worms in itself.
Yeah. But thematically, I could make a case that maybe the Deer Hunter, in that it ends in the United States, would be a more on subject ending to the double feature. Maybe it gives more closure to the historical event.
That was kind of the line I went on because I didn't know. Okay, spoiler here. Me and David had never seen the Deer Hunter before this.
Nope.
And I don't. You never seen Apocalypse Now before this, or you just never watched like the full version?
Never watched the full version. And the only other thing I'd seen about Deer Hunter is that it was made fun of in an American Pie movie. That's my extent with that.
There you go. So I'd seen Apocalypse Now a bunch of times, so I was like, okay, I'll watch Apocalypse Now, get a nice fresh watch on it, and then watch the Deer Hunter, and then it does feel like on theme, right? You see, like, this is the war, and this is the war and the aftermath of the war kind of thing in that theme, which I think works. But okay, do you want to just talk about the Deer Hunter first, because that movie's, I think, is going to be a big point of argument here, or do you want to just get Apocalypse Now out of the way?
Well, actually, yeah. Let's get into the Deer Hunter because it's a little bit more fresh in my mind, and I feel like we can get the schlock out of the way before we just get into praising Apocalypse Now.
I don't know if it's schlock, but it is a weird movie.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe it is harsh to call it schlock, but I mean, I'll start this by saying, when you watch this movie, be prepared to basically watch a romantic movie for the first hour,
Yeah.
not a Vietnam movie. And I would even venture to say that barely be prepared to watch a Vietnam movie, because Vietnam really does take up about maybe 20% of the screen time, if that, because again, that wedding sequence seems so long.
Yeah, which is so weird. Okay, so this movie, it's classified as a war movie. It's classified as a Vietnam film.
Mm.
but they are in Vietnam in like combat. Like we get the traditional, quote unquote, traditional war film tropes for 20 minutes, right?
Pretty much, you could say that proportionately, Forrest Gump is as much a Vietnam movie as The Deer Hunter is.
I mean, you wouldn't be wrong,
Yeah.
but yeah, because a lot of what The Deer Hunter is about is like the aftermath of the trauma of the war. So you're not in the war very long. You just see like the harshest thing that happened to these three guys while they were over there,
Right.
and then how they deal with it, which is interesting. But what's not is again the big fat Roman wedding that happens for the first hour of this movie. They have we watched the full wedding procession, and then the reception, and then the party. Why though?
You know, I can get down with it in that I think like we talked about before the show, there was a part of me that wanted just that bit to be its own movie, and I would have been okay with it because of certain things. Like I mentioned Mystery Pizza, which is a really obscure one to go off of. Probably a more accurate reference was like My Big Fat Greek Wedding or whatever the fuck that movie's called.
Yeah, My Big Fat Greek Wedding. Don't worry, it's a great film.
Yeah,
It's weird.
it's just a
It's
mouthful
fun.
of a title. It reminded me of this in that it was analyzing a specific culture within America. And I was kind of
Mhm.
getting into that, like thinking about, and maybe this was also because Apocalypse Now got me in the mood for like analyzing a movie while watching it.
Yeah.
But I was sitting there like I really was enjoying watching this. I couldn't quite catch on to whether they were like Russian American of some sort. I know they were
They
some
were
sort of
Russian
like
American.
Slovakian descent. Um,
They were definitely Russian American. It's a Russian Orthodox church that they're in, and
yeah,
I'm
and
pretty sure they're speaking
Nastrovia and all
Russian.
that. Yeah, yeah. Now that I think about it, yeah. So it was interesting and watching like the specific wedding rituals and the taboos of like the different generations and kind of looking at the slice of like of what it's like to be an American in Pennsylvania, because I have family from there that I'm not necessarily blood related to, but I know, and it's like it was interesting to watch all of that, but
Yeah.
added almost nothing to the fact that it was a Vietnam movie. Other than that,
I
it didn't even
I
seem like the
mean,
town was noticed that that Vietnam was going on.
well, I think the thing is they're doing this as this is the introduction, right? To all of our characters and their dynamics to each other. And it's an interesting and it's a good way to do it,
Yeah,
How are we gonna meet all of these characters? Well, there's a wedding, right? One of them's getting married before they all ship off to war. So we get to see like this is what their last hurrah looks like. This is how they interact with each other. We notice that there's a love triangle thing going on. And the two best friends, they got to go off and they have to protect their buddy who just got married, and it's an interesting introduction, but it goes on for way too long.
absolutely. Yeah.
Way too damn long. It is a whole film. I'm thinking you could probably cut the movie to where the entire film is the wedding and a funeral to kind of spoil the ending. Where it's just a wedding and a funeral, and we just do a time jump of like 10 years of like the 5-ish years or whatever that pass in this movie.
Yeah,
But yeah.
I think so as well. Now that you say it, of course, it being a Vietnam movie, and then also that we get one of the most iconic scenes that comes from the movie in the middle of this
Mhm.
supposed time jump. I really do think that you could cut straight from the last moment before they are, you know, from in town to Vietnam, because before it, I was sitting there waiting, like, oh, it's going to be a pretty instant cut right from, small town Pennsylvania right into Vietnam, and it was pretty much that.
Mhm.
I think it was like a J cut at most. But you could even cut from that to like right to Robert De Niro's character sitting in a taxi, getting ready to come home, and then that was actually a really good scene where it just goes right to the hotel room and blows right past the house.
Oh yeah, I thought that was fascinating, and honestly, I thought that's how the movie was gonna be, where it starts with this wedding sequence, and then he comes back, and we relive Vietnam through like flashbacks with them. I thought that's how it was gonna play out, but it plays chronologically. It's just I don't know about this movie because I want to say it's a good movie, but like I'm trying to pull out what's good about it, and I know what's good about it. Like the performances in this movie are great.
I feel like it's for me balancing. Is it slice of life like I thought for that first hour, but then all of a sudden it isn't being in Vietnam. It's kind of becomes like two different genres in the movie. One's war movie,
Mm-hmm.
one's like melodramatic slice of life. Or is it that the director or writer or whoever had primary control didn't really want to take the reins of the story? You know what I mean? Like it almost feels like after a point, it's like, are we just shooting things to shoot them and then cutting it together, or is there actually a through line to this that we're going to get to by the end? Because it would have made sense to me if there was an actual, like, kind of strong ending to this whole story.
Mm-hmm.
But going back and thinking about it, I'm like, it's just kind of like a weak ending. I know that's coming also on me criticizing this climax scene that's apparently so iconic, and and don't get me wrong, I watched that scene separately on its own, and it's a great scene. It's just that when you know everything else that's going on in the movie, you're like, you don't even track when Christopher Walken got addicted to heroin, which is apparently a part of that scene. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know.
it and that is the thing that irks me so much is like individual scenes in this movie are brilliant, right?
Yeah,
Like the climax scene is great when they're actually in the Vietnam prisoner camp. Great. When De Niro goes and meets Savage at the hospital after not seeing each other for so long and finding out, oh, Nick's alive. Great scene. There's all these moments of great stuff in there, and then there's just these chunks of what is this? Like the deer hunting scenes are good, and then there's like what why is there this weird like drinking playing pool scene
yeah,
singing I love you baby, like why is that in there? Like that's the thing, there's stuff in this movie where I question why is this in here.
yeah. And I think like there was a video essay I was watching on this one because I watched the whole Cinema Tyler series for Apocalypse Now. It's fantastic. I watched.
I've seen it as well. I would recommend, also I would recommend the Apocalypse Now analysis from, I think it's cinema cartography. It's also very good.
Worth checking out. Go check it out. Uh, I watched this one. I think I still have it pulled up. I watched this one. It's Jack's from Movie Reviews. I've heard of the channel. This is the first time watching one of his videos. So far, it's pretty good in that it's analyzing the movie in this terms of this Howard Hawks quote. You don't have to make a great movie. You have to make a few good scenes and then no bad scenes. Something like this. I'm paraphrasing, and that's I feel like what
Mm-hmm.
is going on in this movie, and what that then this Jack's Movie Reviews essay is trying to prove. Except, I think it's oversimplifying it a bit too much because it also comes on the back of okay, make great scenes, just a few of them, because they can change like the movie. They really can. Sometimes you don't
Mm-hmm.
really get into a movie until you get to its great scene, but you still have to make sure that the dots connect between the scenes. And like you said, I feel like there are moments in the beginning of the movie where like certain scenes overlap in meaning and objective. Like the bar scene could as very well just have been the streaking scene after the wedding because both of them just show immaturity and like uncertainty in life. Yeah.
Yeah. I and I again, this movie kind of makes me mad at how much I have issue with
Yeah.
it. But then I come back to the fact that, god damn it, this is one of the best Robert De Niro and Christopher Walken performances I've ever seen.
This is the only Christopher Walken performance I've ever seen when he was young.
Really?
I can't think of
I
another one. I might have, but I can't think of another one. Let me do a search real quick.
Yeah, because I guess I can talk. I can soliloquy about this for a second. So, like Christopher Walken, Robert De Niro, and John Cazale, they're actors that are very good, and also Meryl Streep is in this movie,
Yeah, that
and they're
was
all
also
really
another
young.
surprising one.
Yeah, and they're all really young, and they're giving it their all. And Christopher Walken is amazing in this movie, and it's weird because Christopher Walken has just slowly become a a a meme of himself in later years. So it's hard to look at him as just like a regular like good actor. Which in this movie he's not just a good actor, he's a great actor.
Yeah, I mean, I really do like him in a lot of that first third of the movie. I think he's very good and charismatic in his role. I think the one that bumps me the most, and this is kind of the thing that doesn't connect the dots between like the MacGuffin of the story, which is going back and getting him after leaving him over there in Vietnam. Which, by the way, I mean you'd probably want to tackle your friend to the ground to get him to come back home with you. I guess that's neither here nor there. Um, but it's that scene when he first sees the underground Russian roulette ring, which when I am introduced to it in the story, I'm like, this does not seem believable that there's just like there's an underground Russian roulette ring run by a Frenchman, which I know sociopolitically makes sense, but like in the movie just feels like they made that up. Um, on top of the fact that
Yeah.
he waltzes in, is disgusted by it, she does the whole thing in the three heads this time, which I believe because he just did that in the previous scene. It's that he then decides to get in the car with the Frenchman and be like, I guess this is my life now.
He's
What?
like, I'm really good at this. And okay, so the Russian roulette thing. That's probably the thing that this movie is the most famous for, right? This is the Russian roulette scene is the stuff that has made this movie immortal.
Yeah.
It's cool, but apparently it's never happened before. For like in like Vietnam POW camps, apparently that was a thing that most historians say never really happened. But it's one of those things where poetic license. But the reason I bring this up, not only for the whole historical context, but also the fact that Christopher Walken apparently is really fucking good at Russian roulette until Robert De Niro shows up. Because I think in the context of the movie, he does it for a couple of years, like a year or something like that.
Yeah,
Because
because
I think they're over there because when they get back, that kid's like 3 or 4,
yeah, and you know
right?
what I don't understand, because the jump from when they initially leave town to the first time that it shows they're in Vietnam is a few years. I know that much.
Yeah,
Um, what's interesting to me is that yeah, like you said, it would have been quite a while that he would have had to be been competing in these competitions in this like Rocky 2 esque, like, we're going to make him the American. Like, well, I don't know what that all is. On top of the fact that, again, when I read that Wikipedia article, to get what the fuck was going on, by the way, apparently he gets addicted to heroin and that's why he stays. And it's not that I don't believe in a heroin addiction. It's not that I don't believe he might have stayed behind, like some people did. It's that specifically the circumstances in which he walks into that first encounter with it, but then also all of a sudden immediately decides he's pissed off at the world, and that's what he did. It just seems so. Who would do that, even if that was the next logical thing? So it's like I don't know.
it's one of those things where the movie is like, well, he's traumatized, so that's why he's doing it, and I'm like, that's not fucking good enough.
I feel it, but I feel like most people would have taken De Niro's route, and they would have at least like gone home first, or if not, gone completely off the deep end, like occurs in the following movie.
Yeah, which is so like weird. Okay, because we could say that Christopher Walken's character Nick, he he goes off the deep end, right? Because I think all three of the our main leads, they show different facets of the effects of the war having the effects the war had on people, right?
Yeah.
Like with De Niro or Michael. I think De Niro's character's name is Michael. Yeah. For Michael, his thing is he like going home. It's not the same. Like home is just not the same anymore. He's affected like emotionally from it.
Yeah.
And then you have Steven, who is comes home and he's lost his legs. He's affected physically by the aftermath of the war, and then Nick is affected um, psychologically. Like he is completely snapped.
Mm.
And when I look at it like that, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Like Nick has snapped. He doesn't really know what's going on anymore. He's kind of just completely off the deep end. So he's playing these Russian roulette games because he wants to die, and he gets addicted to heroin, but he's so like messed up he can't really like take care of himself anymore. And then at the end, he basically kills himself. And that's another thing where the whole movie is trying to look at the effects war have on these working class dudes. But then again, why is Nick the LeBron James of Russian roulette?
I don't know. I mean, like it really, especially when it comes down to the fact that the one moment he does die is just like when the movie needs it the most. I don't know. Yeah, it's like a lot of you have to buy into a lot just to really get into it. And while maybe it's something that a different audience at an earlier time period might have been able to get into, but like with hindsight and all of the other Vietnam movies that we've watched since then, it's just I don't know. There's a poetic quality to it that is kind of not good.
And I'll agree with you about that. But again, I come back to the same problem I had when we started this conversation. The movie is all over the place, and I still don't think it's a bad movie.
Yeah, I mean, I would go back and say to agree with you that if we want to touch on our there's a lot of great scenes in this movie. I mean, I'm just going to go down the list of scenes that basically I think if you can find a way to rip this movie, cut these scenes together and watch it this way, watch it this way. Cut to get
It'll save you like 2 hours.
probably. I mean, you could probably get away with most of the wedding sequence. Frankly, none of it's bad, especially because they're so good at playing the slice of life that after a while I was like, this almost feels documentarian in a weird
Yeah.
way. Um,
That and the wedding sequence serves as a really good introductory scene, especially
yeah,
when we meet like the Green Beret who basically just says, when they ask him what's the war like, and he's like, fuck it, and he just keeps drinking.
pretty much. I would wonder what he happens to be passing through this town for, which kind of goes back to that this movie really likes to just kind of do things for its own convenience.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, so beyond that, the hunting scenes that are after the namesake of this movie, the Deer Hunter, most of those are pretty good.
Yeah.
The I'm not gonna give you my boot scene. The I would say the second De Niro hunting scene is the actual good one, whereas the first one's just kind of there for necessity and B-roll.
Mm-hmm.
Though again, it's not bad. The
I like the when they're at the cabin and who is it, Stan like waves his pistol around and De Niro snaps at him.
Right, because I do think that one of that's another thing that this movie does well with characters is that when it sets up certain bits of information, it does act on those bits of information. You can tell De Niro's character is serious about his guns before the war, and is extra serious about his guns after the war.
Mm-hmm.
Any of the Russian roulette scenes besides the one where Walken actually figures out there's a Russian roulette, Major League Russian roulette.
Could I wonder if they just cut that scene out and then the whole thing is just De Niro comes back and he's like, "What happened to Nick?" And he's like, "I don't know." like we got separated on the way back, and then he finds him in a roulette ring when he comes back. I think that would have made sense if it just kept it super
Or
mysterious
even that,
as to
like,
how he got into it.
if you're gonna go with that whole thing, they're already in the red light district. Just have it be something where Nick is affected by whatever, and then it's just like going off the deep end in probably a more believable way. You know, drugs, hookers, all of the stuff that's available in the red light district, and then just have it be something where they lose contact with them. Which almost in my mind, you know, this gets rid of what it ends up being actually, again, one of the better scenes in the movie when you just watch it standalone. It would get rid of that climax scene, but I could see a scene where, because De Niro's character finds him super easily when he gets back to Vietnam.
Yeah, he goes to one bar and asks one guy and finds him.
Yeah, you'd think
in the whole city.
You think not just searching a whole ass city, a capital city at that, Saigon. You know, it's not Toledo, Ohio, that's for sure. And
also, it's Saigon it's right before the fall of Saigon. People are trying to get the fuck out of there.
Oh yeah, the city is in ruins as he's walking through it in his lovely khaki suit, of which he looks like he should be at that moment as his character. He looks like he should be in a totally different De Niro movie. Like, he almost looks like he should be on the set of The Departed for some reason, even though I know he's not in that. It's like,
yeah.
So anyway, I feel like it could have been something where, like, he goes back kind of before the fall of Saigon, and the fall of Saigon is something that you could lead up to, and it's like a ticking time bomb. Like, the city's about to erupt, and he has to find his friend. He's been there for a month. He really needs to and then he's been searching the streets, and he finally finds him. And it could be one of those things where instead of, like, all of the people are around now, they have the Russian roulette thing just, like, as almost like a Mexican standoff in the streets. You know?
Oh, he could find him, and it's, like, the Russian roulette ring, but it's, like, it's super sad now. Like, it's not, like, all the people cheering and throwing money. It's, like, he's doing this in a room of, like, 10 people.
Possibly, yeah.
Like, it's just, like, the diehard gamblers and the guys running it.
I mean, there's 10,000.
Like, he's not doing this for money anymore. He's not doing it for money anymore. He's just looking for a way to die.
Maybe so, yeah. Well, and that was the thinking in my mind is, like, don't make it about the fact that he's, like, a basketball star. Make it about the fact that he has lost will to live, like De Niro has been tempted by. And De Niro's trying to lend a hand and be like, "I'll take you home, like I promised you." And then, you know, obviously, then that's still there in the scene in the movie. That it really is up to, like, the director's intention is that everything's up to chance, and I get that. It's just that it doesn't really make for that much of a satisfying ending when that's doesn't seem like the intention. I don't know.
Yeah, that's kind of the theme of this movie. It's just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I think you should watch the movie for the performances. This is really a performance-driven movie.
I would say this is a good one for anybody to watch. It would be actors looking for, like you said, performances. There's some interesting performances. There's some overdone performances. It has a really wide variety of these. And even performances from actors that were kind of from before, from before they were big.
Yeah.
So it's always interesting to see those more raw states of them, those stars.
I think this is Meryl Streep's first movie, I think.
Could be. Let's see.
It's good. We're doing our instant research here.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so she was in, like, 3 other movies or, like, TV stuff, but this was her first, like feature film. Because, right after this, she did Manhattan. So
okay, yeah, that was the one that I was thinking of. Is like, did she do that before this? But yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
But yeah, so that's another thing. We have Meryl Streep in here, and she is actually the LeBron James of female Oscar winners. So, like,
total girl boss.
good performance. Yeah, I think she gives a really good performance in the film.
Yeah, it's interesting because
But
like these kinds of small town America characters are always tough acted. I think it's one of the toughest acting jobs because you basically have to play nonchalant cringe, which is
nonchalant cringe.
if you're doing it in a very organic way, it can't be overdone. It kind of has to be like how everybody back then was. They were Hoosier, but they were still with the times, but there was still a semblance of like everybody's just kind of still going on what they were in high school. You know what I mean? Like there's a weird tone to that era of American actor.
I get what you mean. It's one of those things where you have to play a Stephen King character.
A little bit, yeah.
Where everybody is like a working class, borderline redneck in rural like America.
You have to play one of the people that the Bible salesmen go to in that documentary salesman. That's who you're playing.
Yes, you are playing that guy.
Yeah.
That is the people that is the cast of characters in this movie. The people who get knocked on by Bible salesmen.
Yeah. Which is
and actually buy them.
And that's what I mean. It's like it's such a specific thing that if you do wrong, it looks really bad. But if you do it right, it's like, wow, you really. It's like I felt while watching the movie. You really do feel like you're kind of getting in a slice of. It almost feels like the movie is playing live over broadcast a little bit. I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah. It has a documentary feel to it.
Yeah.
Like you said earlier, it has a documentary feel to it with how some of the characters and the interactions work. But yeah, the Deer Hunter. There you go.
God bless America, you know.
God bless America. That's the So, yeah, you want to just talk about Apocalypse Now?
Yeah, we're going to get into Apocalypse Now. And that is obviously going to be a much more uplifting conversation about a movie that is at the top of its game.
Yeah.
And we will get to that right after.
Now?
Yes.
Or Apocalypse Now?
Dean, I found a great way for us to do something cool and to make a little money on the side.
Great. I've been looking for a new place to put my money. What do you got?
No investment needed. In fact, it's super easy, and there's creation tools we can use to record our podcast right from the phone or computer.
Wait, why would you record a podcast on your phone? You want? No, never mind. Where do I put my money for this?
I don't need any of your money. We can even get our podcast distributed to big streaming platforms like Spotify and Google Podcasts.
Oh, I get it now. We're talking big business here, okay? So you're going to need a lot of money from me. How much money are we talking here?
No, definitely don't need any of your money. In fact, we can make money from the podcast with no minimum listenership.
Okay. Now I think I'm getting what you're going at here. We need to spend money to make money, so we're talking some big gains here. Big gains.
No, definitely no. I don't need any of your money. Just all we need to make a podcast right in one place.
Okay. So what you're telling me is that you're gonna need a pretty big check from me for this podcast. So do I just make it out to cash? Because it's no problem for me. I'll just write it up right now.
No, listen, Dean, just head over to anchor.fm and check it out. You'll see why Anchor is the best place for us to record, edit, and distribute our podcasts. And I definitely do not need any of your money.
Shut up and take my money. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Double Feature Part 2 thingy. It's Apocalypse Now. That's what we're talking about. David, let's talk about Apocalypse Now.
I mean,
but now,
where do we even start with this thing? I mean, it's
the acid trip of Vietnam films.
Which you've kind of tripped right into something I can start on, which is that this is a Vietnam War movie that isn't so. And this was kind of why I brought up Full Metal Jacket at the beginning of the show and then made this comment about Slice of Life in Deer Hunter. Those two films very literally look at Vietnam. And I feel like there's a semblance to this, even escaping away from the fact that it's a loose adaptation, I say that in air quotes, of Heart of Darkness. I feel like there's a metaphoric quality to this movie that almost at times borders on parody. It borders on psychological thriller. It borders on a lot of different things that really take this whole Vietnam War film craze that was going on throughout the late 60s, throughout the 70s, into the 80s, and takes it to a whole nother level.
Yeah. This is the real deal art house interpretation of war film, right?
And it doesn't even feel like art house. That's the thing, because it's such a huge production, and what it's saying is actually really poignant. I think it's just that after a while, can you even label it art house? Because it's important. It's completely. And I'm not saying most art house films aren't important. I'm saying that what most house films try to do is something a lot smaller than what this film was trying to do.
Yeah. Like I guess a good example like of art house films are like French New Wave films or um things like Taxi Driver or Mean Streets where they're really really small productions. The director cast basically his friends to act in his movies and they're talking about very simple like how we interact with each other in society and blah 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 and things like that. And then this movie blows up half a fucking jungle
Oh yeah,
because it can, and it's basically and it's B-roll. Blowing up half of a jungle is a B-roll shot.
yeah. You know, it certainly. The first thing I'll say, which is a throwaway comment, uh, this film certainly made me understand Tropic Thunder.
Right?
Yeah, because
I feel like Tropic Thunder is a parody of this
it
film.
absolutely is. Of course it is. But because I mean, from top to bottom, it's all Tropic Thunder is a director who's really adamant about a vision, but is kind of like scrambling.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the cast, which is a mixture of crappy, attitude stars and like nobody actors. The huge sequences, which obviously the one they parody in Tropic Thunder is exactly the one they parody or that they do in Apocalypse Now. Um, and you could almost say that Tropic Thunder is probably a little bit more close to that Heart of Darkness kind of thing. But I mean, aside from all of that, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I will say that this is one of those films I've watched where I from top to bottom got what the film was trying to put down, and was really
Mm-hmm.
locked into the whole journey. Like, first of all, weird that this is a road movie when you really think about it. Uh, and then like you
It,
get locked into that whole like seeking, spiraling further and further and further into the darkness that is Kurtz through the like Martin Sheen's character,
mm-hmm.
Willard, and it's like, yeah, I don't know, a lot to go over here, a lot to go over.
Yeah, this film almost feels like the Odyssey, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Where the guy is traveling through all these weird and crazy locations and getting closer and closer to the heart of darkness, which is Colonel Kurtz and his camp and all that stuff. And it's like it's a psychological thriller all the way through, and it's in the place of this war movie. It really shows what you can do utilizing the tropes of a genre, right? Because this feels very much like a psychological mystery thriller film where Captain Willard's trying to figure out things about Kurtz, trying to understand what's going on. He's following this weird, like, you know, Odysseus style journey through the Vietnam jungle, and it's all in the guise of a very not by the books war film, but it's using all the tropes of a by the books war film. There's guns, there's violence, there's big battle sequences, there's USO shows and jungle combat, things like that. But it's so there's so much under the surface that begs analysis. And I think that's a big reason why this movie is holding as, one of the best movies of all time.
yeah. I mean, uh, uh, it still is kind of leaving me speechless. But okay, let's break it down into two things here. There's
Yeah.
obviously why this film is technically great. like why the production itself is impressive. But then there's also like all of the content within the film. Which one do you want to break into first?
Well, I think if we wanted to break into, okay, the technical stuff is more impressive because this movie is like, I say we break into that because we have to realize Coppola basically made this movie in the editing room. The movie was all over the place. Like they were, what is it, like 2 years over shooting schedule, or they were like a year or two over the shooting projected shooting schedule. The script I think got rewritten basically on the day, and like I think they recasted Martin Sheen once, and then he had a heart attack, and then they had to go back and reshoot it, and then they filmed these weird sequences that never made it into the movie. And also, I found this out, they shot the movie blind because they didn't have a what's it called? They didn't have a film developer where they were filming in Thailand or Vietnam or wherever they were filming, so they had to send it back to America to get it developed. So Coppola had no idea what he shot or what it looked like.
A couple interesting things to note there.
Yeah.
I don't remember Martin Sheen having a heart attack. I know that he would. So the thing that I remember seeing from that Cinema Tyler series was that he was Harvey Keitel was originally cast to play Willard, and it happened to be that Keitel wasn't really gelling with the role, and Keitel wasn't really gelling with the production itself because he's a former Marine. So he decides, kind of mutually at the time, later on he would learn that it's kind of one-sided. Mutually at the time, they decide to terminate and go separate ways. So
yeah.
So
then also he probably saw that he was going to have to be filming in the jungle for like 8 months to a year instead of like the 2 months they thought it was going to be. So
that too.
I ain't got no problems with him bouncing for that.
Yeah. And that was when they found Martin Sheen, because they were originally wanted Martin Sheen before Keitel. It's that Sheen was on contractual obligation to finish a film in Italy, which was interesting looking at some of the stills they have. He played like this sexy spy who was like robbing a train. It's weird. It looks weird. I recommend looking whatever this film is up. But it was basically that when he went to Vietnam then to do the movie, he's older, he's 36. He's kind of old for the part, but he has such a baby face. The decision was apparently Coppola would just wanted somebody who looked good because the character's kind of passive. So they wanted somebody that was good to look at. And, Martin Sheen's a good-looking young guy. Kind of baby face, too, so it kind of fit in my mind. It was when they did the drunk hotel room scene that they started to realize, are you sure you want to do this movie, dude? And then Sheen was like, yeah, I think I'm really clicking into it now. And then,
That scene, by the way, is absolutely amazing.
Totally improvised, too.
Yeah. Apparently, what is it? Martin Sheen, it was Martin Sheen's birthday, and he was like, guys, just roll the camera. I'm going to show you some shit. And he just has a fucking breakdown in front of the camera.
Absolutely.
And it's fascinating.
Yeah, and it's, I think not only does it also make for greatness because that wasn't apparently the original opening to the film. It was originally supposed to be like a bookend kind of type thing where it's like, this is how, this is where I am and how did I get here, with like him rising out of the river at the end. But yeah, I mean that so the other thing too, it wasn't that they were doing the film blind necessarily and that they had to send things back to America, because they did talk about the cinematography crew and the guy he hired, because I guess Coppola really likes the conversation. There's an Italian cinematographer he really likes in it. That's the guy he hires to do cinematography. So
Coppola directed the conversation, so I think he just tried to use the same guy.
Yeah, I think there was some other film, or I can't remember exactly what it was, but they had to because the film stock they wanted to use was Kodak, whatever the hell, but
Hmm.
the Italian cinematographer wants to use Technicolor that to handle all of like the dailies and everything. So they have to send them to a lab in Rome. And by the time they get like the dailies get back to set, it's like 10 or 12 days turnaround.
Which in
It's
which in
is
film
an
means
eternity.
they're basically useless.
Yeah, it's an eternity, and that's part of what contributed to Keitel being fired. Is they were kind of going along with it, waiting for dailies to get back to really see if he could do it. And then by the time they came back, and Coppola was like, "I'm gonna book a flight for him. I'm gonna book a flight." And then yeah, Keitel was apparently mostly okay with it.
Yeah.
So
And it's one of those things because I already said this movie went way over budget, went way over schedule,
wildly,
and by all rights, if people don't really know, most films if they go over budget, it means that there's a problem. It means somebody fucked up somewhere and they're scrambling to try and like basically pump money into a movie to get it finished so they can try and get it done. And when something goes over schedule, that usually means the movie is gonna be shit because there's a problem with the actors, something's not going right, and the director's trying to get it done. So by all rights, this movie, and also this movie is filmed in like the Philippines. This movie is filmed way out there. The effects go wrong all the time. Apparently, like when they bombed out the jungle, the camera wasn't even running for it the first time. They like Martin Sheen had a heart attack. People were getting fucking malaria, and they still make a great movie.
yeah,
It
all of that too. This is the thing that amazes me the most. All of this is going on while there's literally like rebels in the Philippines that the government has to protect the production against.
there was a thing I saw an interview with Coppola that he hated having to film helicopter sequences because half the time the helicopters would go in for the shot and then they would just fly off screen because they had to go and like respond to a rebel attack like 3 miles offset and he had to wait for him to come back. So helicopter scenes took all day, even if it was like one or two shots.
Yeah. But those helicopters, though, I mean, they're just insane on screen. Some of the, I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
aside from one scene in Darkman that is probably the best helicopter scene in all cinema history, this has to be the other one.
And you hate Darkman. Why come on?
Listen, I'll give it credit where credit is due, but you know, this like the surfing in Vietnam scene, just, and that's kind of like that bit where I said there's parody in this. That's the sequence I think I mean, like kind of all of
With Colonel Kilgore.
yeah, and all of Robert Duvall on screen. It feels almost borderline comedy because that character in itself is kind of comedic, but then you get certain shots too, like having service while they're in the middle of a war zone, which is just it almost like how could you deny that isn't making fun of the absurdity of the Vietnam War?
Yeah. And then you also have Coppola making his cameo in the movie as one of the news anchor people
Yeah.
that's supposed to be filming the war. And he's just telling people, don't look at the camera, keep going, go like you're in combat. And they're actually in fucking combat.
Yeah.
And no one can not look at the camera. It is weird. Because that sequence is like the first step on their journey, right?
Pretty much.
When they actually start that's where they actually get to start the river. And it's such a great opening step because you see this giant massive battle and you see the Americans are just absolutely overwhelming anything they see before them, right? And it's hilarious because they're led basically by an incompetent buffoon
Absolutely.
who's only good at his job because he has all this shit at his disposal.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that there's a level of that, um, kind of what all of Deer Hunter was about, that chance involved with war. Because Robert Duvall's character really does feel like he is able to be as confident as he is purely by chance with barely even flinching when missiles cross him because he knows, quote unquote, they won't hit him or something. I don't even know what the emotion is. I mean, my favorite part about that character isn't even his famous "I love the smell of napalm in the morning." It's when he's knelt down and he's like, you know, they say this war's gonna end someday, and then he just kind of like shakes his head like that's a damn shame.
And he walks away, and I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
All of the Kilgore scenes, I'm like, what the fuck?
Or
This guy is Wile E. Coyote let loose on screen.
Look at the way they split
and it's
down
not
the
like
middle. That was
as
beautiful.
their gunfire.
Yeah.
Oh. And it's so weird that he's this surfing obsessed lieutenant colonel, and he's leading this giant like battle, and he doesn't care. He's like, my boy's got this. It's fine. He has utter no expectations that any of his people will be hurt in these attacks.
Which is interesting because
what the fuck?
You see some of his men are like, hey, are you sure? And he's like, yeah, do it. I want to serve.
He's like, if I say it's safe to surf this beach, it's safe to surf this beach. God damn it! As there's grenades going off in the water.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then we get to the next step of our journey on this river of apocalypse. Now, is that when we get to the USO show? Is that the second step of the journey?
Good question. I think so. That's at least the next like over the top sequence.
Yeah, which also that USO show, that's like Pleasure Island, right?
Yeah, we're still close enough in enemy lines that these kinds of things can happen. Obviously, the danger becomes the soldiers themselves, which is, I don't know. One of the things I really liked about Deer Hunter was the Saigon scene and like the craze involved with that. And I almost feel like for lack of not being able to shoot that moment, because it would have made no historical sense in the movie, that was as close as they could get to shooting the fall of Saigon. It's just the soldiers hanging onto the helicopter.
Just scrambling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Movie's interesting.
So after that, I think that's the point where we get to the fishing boat that they board, right?
Yeah, which, okay, most uncomfortable scene in the movie?
Close to it. I think because there's a lot of uncomfortable things that happen after this that are just kind of transpiring on the boat. And I do think that this is like the de facto, or I guess not de facto, but whatever the opposite of that is, the moment in the movie that's like the point of no return. Up until this point, a lot of the antics have been kind of getting us into some comedic trouble, and then all of a sudden this very real thing happens, which is a total accident almost, and only happens because people are really stupid.
Yeah. Namely Mr. Larry Fishburne.
Yeah.
Who is also, did you know Lawrence Fishburne like lied about his age in this movie? I think he's only like 14 or 15.
But it kind of works to Coppola's vision because he wanted people who were unknown, and because basically he knew kids were fighting this war, and I think that's a good thing to point out. That,
yeah,
I mean, for God's sakes, the soldier he's playing is 17, and I'm like, would you be able to go to war if you were 17?
I think so. I think you could get drafted I don't know if you could get drafted at 17.
Sort of like permissions, yeah, maybe. I don't know.
I don't know. It's weird. But yeah, so I think that scene's just uncomfortable because I think that scene is the image a lot of like the anti-war people had of Vietnam. Like that's what Vietnam was to people in America was, oh, these Americans are going around and they're just stopping these people and, killing them in their boats, and they're just trying to like save puppies and shit.
A little bit, and I think there's a little bit of parody in that. Of course, all of it yields a golden retriever puppy by the end of it. I
Yeah.
just feel like it's a version of the surfing scene, but on a much more intimate level. It's the
Mhm.
same exact thing. They go in, they ruin these people's lives, and then what do they get out of it? Some kind of thing that they either wanted or want to take. Yeah, I mean, I think it's an oversimplified version of the Vietnam War because there's a lot of stuff that goes into it that is equally as bad. But
Yeah.
uh, yeah, I think
Also, you. Oh, sorry. Continue your thought.
I
Continue
was
your
just
thought.
gonna say to sum it up is that I do think it's just that simplified version so that the character group we can stay with we kind of get more of a grip on.
Mm. And also, it has one of the most poignant character moments for Willard, where they have the woman who's like shot, and they're like, "Hey, we're gonna take her back to a hospital and get her looked at," and Willard just shoots her dead,
Yeah,
and he just looks at the boat captain. And he's like, "I told you not to stop the boat," and just goes back to doing whatever he was doing, like that casually. And at that moment, I'm like, okay, no, Willard's not this like, oh, he's like this shaky, not sure of himself captain he might not be able to pull the trigger at the end. That's when you realize, no, he's a cold blooded murder machine. He thrives in this shit.
yeah.
Oh, great scene, great scene.
I mean, incredibly fascinating. Um,
Yeah.
it is after this that everything starts to go insane. In that, I think after this, the next thing they get to is, correct me if I'm wrong,
It,
is it the final checkpoint before they're in
where they're fight.
North Vietnam?
I think so. I think that where they get to the battle lines at the fort, right? And it's the
Yeah,
bridge. Yeah, I think that's the next sequence, or at least the next big bullet point we're gonna talk about. And that scene is fascinating because you never see the enemy.
nope.
They're fighting in complete darkness. They're throwing mortar fire. They're shooting. There's an actual battle raging on, but you never see the enemy.
Yeah, and this is, I think, where it starts to touch on like the warfare has evolved from like this brutal, up close and personal brawn. We just kind of show up and blast the shit out of it. To
Get home for dinner.
we're starting to see the psychological take over. Um, After being shaken up by intimate events, the soldiers now see soldiers that are basically either they try that kind of brawnish thing with the guy who's on the gun like freaking out and just shooting into the night. They still try that, it doesn't really work, but the one guy who's like so in tune psychologically with the war he's fighting can fight the war with the grenadier,
Oh yeah,
or hacksaw or
like he
whatever
can
they
just
call
like
him.
the little like hand grenade
Yeah,
thing, the grenade launcher, where he can like just feel where the enemy is without looking out over the trenches and just shoot the grenade.
yeah,
Yeah, it's fascinating because everyone at that base is completely cracked, right?
yeah. I feel like it's like the more you get close to the reality of the war, it almost takes on because there's a lot to balance in this movie as far as what it analyzes, which is kind of another half of what we would go over for this movie. And you've seen characters like obviously Robert Duvall's character, or even people back in like in the briefing scene, who are in a
Mm.
very American world still. They're clear in their directive, even though I don't think they fully realize the reality of the war on the ground, which that's kind of a common theme for Vietnam. Um,
Yeah,
or even going back to a movie like Grand Illusion. Um, but now it's gotten to a point where we're so close to the action, literally right up close next to it, that the leadership has gotten so asinine and devolved that nobody knows who's in charge because nothing makes sense anymore.
they ask who's your CO, who's the commanding officer. Man, I have no idea. Like, we just stay here, we rebuild the bridge every day when it gets blown down so they could blow it up the next night, and we defend the bridge. That's what we do at the base. That's all we do, day in and day out. And I'm like, the futility of that would drive somebody insane.
Absolutely insane. And it shortly does. Because this is where we get into a section of the movie where characters start to get picked off. First on that list
Yeah.
will be our young gun, poor Larry
Larry.
Fishburne. I believe next after that is the boat driver.
Chief.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we have Chef dies. Chef gets it when they actually get to Kurtz, right?
Yeah. He doesn't get it until after the first night spent there, because this is an interesting part of this character web. Obviously, we got two of them got picked off. It's basically all the young people that die and all the old people that die in the war.
Mm-hmm.
Then this character web devolves even further into, we kind of have three different versions of how we're supposed to take this section of the movie. There's one that is still in the very American, trying to cling on who they used to be shoes. That being Chef. There's the Sandman, the surfer.
Yeah, Lance.
Yeah, he is giving into it totally. Obviously, he has been through the drugs and everything. He will totally give into it. And now Martin Sheen's character is kind of left up to choose which one he's going to be. Is he going to continue to fight for the war that he's been told to fight? Or is he going to give in to this idea that Kurtz is preaching to the masses now, that there's a different way of life out there that you could live, and it involves totally letting go of who you were. It involves gross, almost savage transformation of character, but it is another form of survival that you can take on. And that's this section of the movie is just like insane to me. Insane.
I want to see the movie of Kurtz first, I want to see the movie with Kurtz, right? I want to know how the fuck he got these people to follow him. How this John Jones cult leader, acid trip surrealist being came to be, and how he's able to rally these people. What's he doing up there? Because Kurtz is such a fascinating character, and also it's Marlon fucking Brando. So everything he says, you just is captivating, even if it makes absolutely no goddamn sense.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because I had way back when I was in the 8th grade, I had a teacher who served in Vietnam in the late 70s.
Mm.
And he was very, very candid about it. He's a very bubbly guy. He's a science teacher, physical sciences. Loved doing these experiments with explosions and these types of things. Kind of a run-of-the-mill science teacher, biker on the weekends, right? That's the type of guy we're looking at.
Okay.
And he basically would tell us all the time about his time in the Special Forces after Vietnam. But there was this one time he told us about when he was still in Vietnam. And how he kind of came into contact with this group of covertly undercover special forces. Their task was basically to go into the jungle and just cause havoc for the North Viet Cong. To the point that they would cause for the Southern forces, do the same thing. To whatever methods you think apply. And it would devolve to the point that they would basically live out there almost in nude, underground, and would collect toes on necklaces of people they've killed. So this kind of savagery, in all intents and purposes, existed in Vietnam. This is coming off of I guess you could call this secondhand retelling of it from when I was in 8th grade. So take that with a grain of salt and do your own research. But that's what's so fascinating about this, is that part of me wants to sit here and think Marlon Brando's character is some sort of demigod that I'm supposed to get a poetic thing out of. But there's a part of me that, like you said, Dean, really would be interested to know what is going on what happened to get us all the way here, because there's hundreds of people here, hundreds, natives as
Yeah.
well.
He has rallied a society around him.
Yeah.
He's rallied, like, it feels like he's rallied basically the entire jungle around him, and which is the thing, you know. Once we get past the enemy, once we get past the Viet Cong as the enemy, what the real enemy is the jungle, because it's all around you. Everything is dangerous in the jungle, and Kurt controls the jungle because he's in this giant fucking temple that's like on the river, and it's so crazy.
Yeah. But the reason I still like to go back to, like, the thing that impresses me most about Brando's character, not only is the shaved head perfect, I mean, just especially when you can hear, like, the follicles
Him rubbing his hand.
The lighting then is also perfect in how Brando plays within his lighting. I mean, he's a master actor, so of course he knows how to hit his spots, but the concealing of his body and his face while he's giving that first monologue is just perfect. And then, like, how they continue to use that motif as they continue going on in this section, it really just, like, makes this part of the movie, which kind of starts to meet up with something I've glossed over to this point, but the soundtrack starts to meet up with you, and you really start to sink into Martin Sheen's mindset in this section. I think it worked completely for me.
Yeah, and here's a crazy thing. Okay, so I 100% agree with you. Like, Brando's performance there, how the lighting plays with him, how you feel like you're in Martin Sheen's shoes, and you're being captivated. You're being talked to by, like, the greatest cult leader ever. Like, he's making you buy into his shit. But the reason it's lit like that is because Marlon Brando showed up to set 100 pounds overweight, and Francis Ford Coppola had to find a way to hide the fact that Brando had a giant beer gut.
But, you know, there's a part of me that...
Because Brando has utter contempt for his job.
That too. But there's a part of me that would believe it. You know what I mean? Like, there's a part of me that if all these people worship you, and you have a society of hundreds of people at your disposal, like, yeah, you would eat like a fucking king, and you'd be kind of fat. Like, there's a moment at which he's walking out onto, like, the entrance of the temple, and he puts his hand up, and is just kind of, like, leaning there. And there's I'm looking at his body, and it's worn, it's curvy, it's kind of gross looking, but at the same time, the relaxed nature of it is almost, like, transcendent in a psychological sense. You know what I mean?
It's the body of a king that's broken down and knows his kingdom's going to fall, but he's completely ready for it to come.
Yeah, because there's almost something, like, truly prophetic that he's trying to feel out that I don't think Sheen was expecting up to that point. And obviously, yeah, he doesn't. Willard has no clue that Kurtz is going to be okay with being killed. But I feel like that's kind of this... That's where I really started to click with the movie, and seeing this sort of that... What Coppola wanted to notice is that all of this, that through the Heart of Darkness, it doesn't just end. There's an infinity to it that makes it cyclical, in which we start to see, okay, yeah, when we think about what the title of the movie's called, the apocalypse comes to happen after this descent into darkness, because it will all begin again. And that's kind of like the craze that Brando's character is getting into, that you start to fully believe once you're like, oh, this is kind of weird. I almost feel like I should be watching an Aztecian movie at this point. Like,
the movie has predicted the war.
Yeah, I don't know. It's so, yeah. I mean, from there to, like, the moment when he rises out of the river, ready to make the kill. I mean,
beautifully shot, by the way. The entire sequence,
and then the Doors song coming back into play. It's like, Jesus Christ! I mean, absolutely insane.
Can we get a chef's kiss, boys? Ready? Mwah.
I mean, just
That is what this movie is.
yeah.
Chef's kiss.
I don't know. I mean,
So,
I really because there's I'll make this interesting though to kind of wrap things up here.
mhm.
I was looking up reviews of the movie afterward because I was fascinated. I'm like, this has to be. I've said this about The Departed before, on the show, but this has to be
Mm.
literally like outside of being one of my favorites now, one of the best films ever made. And I was looking at one review that apparently panned the film and in mentioning that the film ends not with a bang but with a whimper, and I'm just sitting there like, but isn't that kind of the point? Isn't the point of the movie to kind of end? Because the way I watched it, or at least the cut I watched it on, uh, literally ends just like we fade to black. He's going back down the river after grabbing what's his face and saying like we need to return. Uh, and then it just is like the copyright thing at the bottom of a black screen, and then it's done. And it really does leave you like,
You're like, that. What happened? It's true. It's true. The ending of the movie where he grabs Lance, he goes down the river. They're going home. It's like he's come to do his job. The soldier has gone to do his duty, but he's coming back with something else. The whole story is like this is the mission, and then what Kurt's told Willard and all the things and all the ruminations, the philosophy, all the horrors, all the fucked up shit he saw on the way. That's the stuff that soldier's gonna carry back with him once he leaves.
and it
And
almost
it's like it's almost like an allegory for like the PTSD and the trauma you suffer and the things you come back
and
with.
it almost even feels like what Kurtz is attempting to do in like prophesizing his death is not just for the people that are left in this little group society, which I almost feel like he could care less of a shit about. It
Yeah.
almost starts to feel like he's sending Willard back as like the arbiter of that for the larger world. Maybe this is also me looking into it and feeling like I'm analyzing this like my dad would, who thought, by the way, at the end of uh, Blade Runner, he thought the replicant literally turns into a pigeon. So that's I don't know. That's just a glimpse into how I feel right now analyzing this. But I mean, I don't know. It's
This is a movie that begs to be analyzed, though.
yeah. And I've never been one to say that I like a movie that leaves it up to interpretation, but I think this is that kind of because the movie still like it has something it's trying to say, isn't leave it all up to interpretation, and I think I like that. I like that there are certain things I can think about myself, and there are certain things that Coppola literally is trying to make out of what all this is. So I don't know. I mean, if I wanted to segue this into the wrap up. I can answer one of your questions in that, of course, this is the better movie, and it is literally in that opposite of this. The ending to Deer Hunter is that they sing "God Bless America" in a bar. So do with that what you will.
Look. You will look. After watching this, 100% agree. Apocalypse Now is just the strictly better movie. If you can only watch one this weekend, watch Apocalypse Now. The only reason you would watch Deer Hunter over Apocalypse Now is if you really, really wanted to see early performances by very, very good actors and those great performances therein.
Yeah.
But other than that, Apocalypse Now is better pretty much across the board, if I had to say. So, but yeah. And I guess here's the other thing. The let's put on our pretentious hats real quick. To ask the questions we've asked the whole month. Is this movie a accurate, or is it paying respects to the real wars that it is portraying?
So this is.
Whereas, go ahead.
I think like the thing that I go back to in answering that question, a lot of this month has been about depicting the war historically and trying to be educational in that aspect. And then I think Vietnam films not only were the first of this kind, but kind of like the first to really take a historical event and almost analyze it, not just retell it. Um,
Mhm.
and especially when a lot of these films were made at a time when it was meant to protest the war as the war was still going on, albeit this movie was made after that.
As with the Deer Hunter. Granted, Vietnam lasted for 10 years, so I feel like much of these movies were ruminated as the war was going on. Every principal in this film was alive for the war.
Yeah. So I think there's almost like none of these films can really do wrong, I think. Because all of, all of that war, like we mentioned last time with World War Two was heavily documented, but the Vietnam War
Mhm.
was literally broadcast. So it's like there's nothing about the war anybody can't go find out for themselves. So I almost feel like the filmmakers exactly get it right in trying to just capture the feeling of the war rather than just the information about it. And in a lot of different ways, we've watched Full Metal Jacket, which has been said to be one of the most accurate depictions of it. The Deer Hunter, which, despite like you found out, like certain liberties that were taken to get away with a shitty story, um, did really good at capturing life at home, which I don't feel like, aside from Taxi Driver, there have been a lot of major films that do that. And then there's this movie that really takes a, I don't know. Poetic is even doing it some injustice, but like there's a what's the word I'm looking for?
A cerebral analysis.
A deconstruction of the war. I think, like where you start to look at the event with some time, as there's time between now and the event, and you can see what the truth of it really was. So I think there's, in a way, we could look at it and be like, yeah, there's probably things these movies. I don't think there was a battalion out there who was actually trying to go surf in the middle of a battle.
I feel that was probably historically inaccurate.
Yeah, but in a way,
If I had to take a jump at it.
it captures in a very poignant and um, a sense that you get while you're watching the movie what the war actually felt like.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing about these two movies that most of the other films we have talked about this month have didn't do. They really get you to feel what war is like. Where like the Deer Hunter I think does it very well cuz it makes you feel life at home, life at the war and then life after the war. And Apocalypse Now makes you trying to feel what it's like to be in the war, like in the jungle, in the shit. And it's fascinating. I think these two movies do serve well at depicting the war accurately or true to life in that it's not trying to show the war accurately, it's trying to get you to feel how that feels. And obviously people can't without actually experiencing it, but it like you sympathize with it. The empathy is there and it's good. I think that's my little answer to the philosophical pretentious questions we've been asking this month. The point is not to be accurate, just to feel what these people felt like.
A really good way to wrap it up, in my mind, to really wrap that question. It kind of almost, again, ironically, brings a cyclical point back to the thing we were talking about in ancient Roman wars, where it's like we're not necessarily trying to capture, you know, historical accuracy. We're trying to capture a feeling, and maybe that can be more important at times.
But yeah, and now let's get our little wrap up comparison here. Um, so Apocalypse Now is the better movie for this weekend, but I think the double feature does work. I think these two do work well together on a very specific theme of you're looking for this is the feeling outside, like how war affects you outside of combat, and this is how the war affects you in the combat,
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
And I think you can watch these movies together and enjoy them, but be ready to for your ass to go numb because these are so fucking
Oh
long.
yeah,
Oh my god. To lighten the mood a little bit, Jesus Christ, these movies are long.
yeah. I mean, That's, if anything, that's the certainty we have with these two is it's going to be as long as our, well, again, ironically, our first double feature of this month. Um, so be prepared.
Gladiator and Spartacus.
But you can get a lot
Yeah.
out of both these movies.
Yeah. So yeah, David, are you excited for us to finally get out of War Month?
Yeah, and I think everybody else will too. We've been in the shit for too long, as they say. And
5 whole weeks. This is a 5 week month.
yeah, I mean, it's insane to think about it. But yeah, we really are. And it's going to be a lot easier in April. And for April, we're going to be doing a month of comedies, which is going to be great. I mean, you can't never get tired of comedy.
It's true. Comedy is one of the comedy is the genre that lasts the longest, as Charlie Chaplin has shown.
Mm. We're going to be starting Comedy Month with just an absolute legend within the genre, as directors and producers go. We're going to be doing a Mel Brooks double feature.
Yes. He has appeared on the podcast before in one of our worst double feature films with Spaceballs, but honestly, Spaceballs, sorry to throw sacrilege out there, I think we would both agree is not his best film, right? But these two, we have David's favorite Mel Brooks film in Blazing Saddles, and we have my favorite Mel Brooks film in Robin Hood, Men in Tights. And yeah, I think we're gonna have a good time with these ones.
I think so too.
Because it's just gonna be nice not watching people die for like 3 goddamn hours.
Yeah,
oh Lord.
You know, you say that. I think both those movies do have men die, but not for 3 hours. So maybe it's that watching men die at the hour and a half mark is totally palatable.
Totally palatable. Yeah. Totally palatable.
I don't know.
All right.
Well, you know, crazy to think about that. We've been over here in the shit for almost a year. We're getting there, and that it's a little bit of non-podcast fodder for a minute. Crazy to think that this whole pandemic's been going on for a year. You know, you kind of forget what life was like before, but maybe that's a little bit of a good thing sometimes. You know.
Well, hey, I'm just saying, from everything I've heard, we are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, and I can only be hopeful that we can all go out and watch movies in theaters once again, because I never realized how much I loved going to the movie theater until the pandemic happened.
Yeah, I can't imagine a little bit before the pandemic started, we upgraded televisions and got glorious 65-inch big screen action, but I can't imagine going through this pandemic and watching all these movies on a 40-inch television. I mean,
bro, like, I'm looking at a 33-inch TV. It's like fucking rich boy over here.
Plebeians, okay? This is exactly why I want to get back to the movie theater. I want to see things in 100-foot glory, That's how I think some of these things were meant to be seen.
It's true. Do you imagine watching Apocalypse Now on a full-size like movie screen? It'd be something else, man.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But if people wanted to see more of our glorious, shtick, where else could they find us?
You will be able to find us on anywhere podcasts are listened to, except for Apple Podcasts. Boo! But you can find us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Radio Public, and all these kinds of podcast platforms, including our sponsor, Anchor.fm, where we host our podcast, and you can too. You can also find us on our YouTube channel, In the Frame. We post this podcast, our other podcast, Too Obscure for TV, on which we do reviews of just some weird picks with some fun picks and friends, and it's a good time.
That is the beer and movie podcast. Where have a couple beers, watch shit that I find in the bargain bins, and see how it goes.
Yeah, it's the one where you enjoy having a beer during the podcast, not the ones like this month where you kind of feel like you need the beer to not go insane while watching more movies.
Yeah.
And other than that, you can follow us on Instagram, _feature podcast, if I am correct again, Dean. I don't know.
You got it. Bro, you got it. You're on the ball this
I'm on
week.
the ball, and you can keep up with everything we do there, and do that, and so that when we come back next time, you can laugh along with us.
And I can't wait for next week, because finally we can say goodbye, Vietnam. Goodbye, war. We're all done. We're finished.
No more, thank you.
Done. All right. But yeah, everybody. So, smiles and cupcakes. Stay happy. It's all good.
Oh boy.
God bless America.
No, Jesus. I mean, don't end it like that, Dean. Not like them.
Don't end it like Deer Hunter. God
Just
bless
like a
America.
spoonful of those horrible bar-made scrambled eggs.
Oh God. Have you ever had bar-made scrambled eggs? They're sus at best, but whatever.
Yeah.
All right, we'll finish by
Okay.
by this time.
See you next week.
All right. Peace.